You don't have to be a millennial to be socially savvy. We believe anyone can join Generation Social Media, and your journey starts now. This is the Generation Social Media Podcast by Chatterkick.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Generation Social Media. Today I have a special guest, Liv Myers here at Chatterkick, and we are going to talk about social media and how it plays into the role of mergers and acquisitions within an organization. We're calling it Social Due Diligence, and I'm so excited to have Liv here today. She has been part of this with our clients and also has a master's in communications and organizational leadership. Okay, great. So welcome, Liv, to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about this. It's been kind of top of mind for some of our clients lately.
Yeah, I think the merger and acquisition landscape has just definitely sped up in the last couple of years. And most people don't think of social media as a tool in the toolbox. They're thinking, okay, I got to get a press release out. What's day one going to look like? How am I going to communicate internally and externally? But what they really miss is the fact that these social media channels they're on, they're hot, they're live. And oftentimes you may not communicate with your marketing department until the deal's almost ready, it's done. And so there may not be enough time or even the right access for making up lost time. So let's just start out by just talking a little bit about what you are seeing with clients, or even just with your experiences in terms of how social media fits into the larger landscape of internal and external communication.
What I've seen in the past is that social, like you said, it's kind of that last piece that falls into the puzzle. And generally what people are doing is they're putting out the social tile or the announcement at the same time that the press release goes out, or sometimes in lieu of the press release entirely. And they do use their social channels specifically to make that announcement. With that being said, I think that there's an opportunity for savvy marketers to flex those PR muscles a little bit and let the news organizations actually scoop that a little bit. Yeah. And then you can work in tandem with them. And, whenever that news release goes out, you could share it onto your social channels. Or, like I said, you could really lead the charge and own that message yourself. But there is an opportunity to get a little free press and free advertising, if you will, out there, and just increased exposure with those new news outlets that you have. I think that really you should be working in tandem with the news outlets to determine, specific day and time that those announcements are going to go out. But absolutely do not do that until you tell your internal team.
Right.
I think that is a huge misstep that some companies take, is that they'll send an email out at 8 a.m. saying, hey, we're going to have this huge merger and acquisition. And then at noon, the press release goes out, and your team doesn't have that time to digest that, to ask the important questions that they need to ask. And so really bringing in your internal team a little bit before that announcement goes out is super crucial.
Yeah, I think people don't realize that these social media channels are being, especially when there's a big shift, whether that's you're getting acquired, you're merging, there's some element of change that happens. Your employees are going to be looking at those channels, probably even more so than your customers and your prospects. And so it's one of those kind of things that we want to bring into CEOs' landscapes, especially as they're thinking about this, because they need to make sure that the way that they want that communicated feels good both internally as well as externally. What do you think some of the biggest missteps that these companies are making?
One of the big things whenever it comes to merger and acquisition announcements and talking internally to teams, like I said, not giving your teams the time to process that information, to ask those questions, not involving the internal marketing team on those decisions. I think that, to your point, they know your brand, and they should be crafting that message with the brand in mind, internally and externally. I think where the internal marketing team comes into play too is that first, they are employees, and they are probably going to ask you some questions that you have not thought about and you have not addressed. And I don't think that whenever you make that announcement, you need to have everything figured out for your business at that time. But you need to address what you don't know. And you need to say, we don't know that yet, and we're going to continue operations unless otherwise, told
Right.
not to in our regular fashion. And so I think that it just comes back to not including some of those other employee voices. Now, with that being said, you need to control who has this information first. So
Right.
it should really be people that you trust to bring into the fold, and it should probably be later on down whenever you know that things are going to be signed.
Right. You're close to signing that deal.
Yeah.
There's a lot that can happen in that last leg. So
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then, on top of that, once the release goes out, I see a lot of companies, okay, we're done.
we're done. Yeah.
Like, we've announced it and we can move on, and that's it. And no, that's really when, like, you're kind of in the middle of it, honestly. I don't want to say the work begins there, but you're actually in the middle of it. And now you've expressed it to the world, and now the world's going to have questions,
Right.
Clients, partners maybe that you're working with as well. And so you should be addressing that on social media, because if they aren't emailing you, if they aren't picking up the phone to call you, they're going to the social channels
Right.
to talk to you about that. And so it really falls into social listening and listening to that chatter and having a moderation and response plan as well.
Yeah, I think that's so critical, because that's the thing with social, right? It's a two-way street, and there's going to be questions that come up. And if it's your biggest customer that happened to get on LinkedIn and now they're asking a question on that post, like, what does your marketing team have to say about that? And those are hard questions that they may not feel suitable answering unless you have a great process and operations system put in place to say, okay, this is how we're going to say it. We're not going to just throw some copy and pasted response up there. That doesn't work. Lawyers speak, no offense to any attorneys out there. It just doesn't work on social. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel genuine. And then it backlashes, right?
Yeah, I think, there are some canned responses that people have out there, and they feel really inauthentic, and people will call you out
Yes.
for them. I think on LinkedIn specifically, you can get away with it a little bit more because it is a little bit more professional setting. But really having that communication, I would say for business leaders, you should be available to your marketing team, especially in those first few weeks. If they are calling you to ask you a question, how do I need to reply to this? Like, you should be prepared to answer that, and not just be like, I'll deal with that later. I mean, it's super important to control that message, especially in those first few weeks.
Yeah, and I also think, like, it's really important for leadership to understand the pulse of how maybe dramatic this sort of like merger acquisition scenario is. Is there going to be layoff? Like, if you know that there's some really hard conversations that you're going to have to make, you may want to approach things a little bit more strategic in those instances, as opposed to maybe something that feels very synergized with two companies. Everybody's going to work out well. Like, your overall, like, the experience is going to be positive. I think you kind of have to get an idea of what that's going to appear like online.
Absolutely. I think that people will read through, any BS that you're putting out there. And that's going to be the first question that every employee has, and that you should be thinking about to address, is they want to know, how does this impact me? How does this impact my job? Will I be laid off? Will I be under a new manager now? Will I be in a completely different job? Those are all questions that you should at least have something of an answer to. And it's not, well, we're going to figure that out later. It's, we're looking at how to best combine our talents. And there might be some shifts in the organization.
Right.
And we might not know those fully for a few months. But, we are expecting X amount of layoffs, or we are expecting, to keep our entire team. I think that those are important things to get out there fairly early on in that conversation.
Yeah, and I think the companies that I've seen do this really well, one, I really feel like the leadership team is intentional and cares about this stuff, and they have a plan. And the plans don't always go exactly as one would think, but the fact that they have a plan and that communication strategy is really well thought out, and there's being small tweaks of verbiage and words, it does matter. And it matters to your employees, and it matters to your customers. But I wanted to go back really quick to one thing you mentioned, because I think a lot of CEOs are thinking, well, how can I control the messages that my employees are writing, right? Because that's the wildfire that you can't control. There's really no used to actually stop that. But you mentioned social listening. How can brands and businesses, if they're going through one of these transitions, really leverage social listening so that at least they have a pulse on what's going on?
At the bare minimum, you should be checking everything that your organization is being tagged on. You should be setting up Google alerts. Hopefully you already have these things set up.
Should be easy.
But if you don't, it should be part of your checklist. Do we have Google alerts for any time that our brand is mentioned? Do we have a pulse on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter, everywhere that these outlets, TikTok even, that people are going to go to? And then what is your plan? Is it to respond to them directly on their post? Because, what you hope to see are the people that are like, I'm super excited for this merger. Can't wait to expand our horizons and opportunities and, provide better work for our clients. But what you might have are people that are, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. And they're going to fire us all and just panic. And, one, it's taking a step back and having that empathy. And again, do you address it? You should address it on the post itself, even if it's just saying, hey, Joe, we hear your concerns. Let's talk about this in the office tomorrow.
Right.
You should, at the bare minimum, be making that statement. And then that's a separate conversation with Joe in the office tomorrow. But you don't need to air all of your dirty laundry for the world to see. And then it's even on the social, if they are commenting on your social post itself of your announcement or anything else that you have after that, we kind of, whenever we are moderating for clients, it's, are people being trolly? And if they are being trolly, then you can hide or delete that comment and don't be afraid to do that. And then address it with the person later. It's not just this existed in the digital space and it's fine. It's very much combining the physical and the human connection in the digital world, if you will.
Yes, exactly. Sounds familiar.
Yes.
What about tagging? Because I think sometimes people read a bad comment online about maybe a merger and acquisition that is taking place, but that one comment takes all their emotional space, so they say everybody's commenting about this. Is there a way that you can tag this information so you can see holistically the positive versus negative and the neutral sentiments?
Yeah, absolutely. We can definitely do that, at least with the tools that we have on Sprout. And we can provide trends. We've done this for clients in the past that have said, we're going through an M&A and I want to know the general sentiment out there. And we can tag incoming messages. We can tag even messages that are just maybe not employees, but other people in the industry talking about it, and get a positive and sentiment trend report to show you. And even over time, we can show you, maybe it was really positive to begin with, but then maybe as more details are emerging, people are getting frustrated with this. And what I love about it is that it gives you real-time data to do actionable items to address these things. And if you start to see an increase in these negative comments, what are they saying? Why are they saying it? Why now? Why not before?
Right.
And what should we be putting out there? How should we be addressing this at that time? So I would say, you're going to want to monitor this. It's like I said, it's not just shove it out. Okay, we've announced it. It's a whole monitoring of it to make sure that you are controlling the narrative to some degree.
Right. And I think this is just a perfect example of why CEOs and leadership teams do need to understand the tools that they have available. And that's why this stuff matters, is because you can look from a top-down level to say, what are our trends? How are people responding? How are they, how is that changing over time, just like you mentioned. So I think this is amazing insight for so many of our business leaders. Hopefully that our listeners got some information today too. So thank you very much, Liv, for coming on Generation Social Media today, and we look forward to our next episode.
Thanks so much for having me.
That's it for this episode of Generation Social Media Podcast. If you had an aha moment or just a ha-ha moment, I would be so grateful if you leave a review with the moment you loved most. If you have a question you'd like us to answer on the next episode, fill out the form on generationsocialmediapodcast.com.